In this video, I'm going to show you how to make music in the style of Tinlicker. Tinlicker are a duo that are signed to labels such as Anjunadeep, Armada, and mau5trap. Tinlicker are well known for their beautiful melodic elements that are combined with high energy progressive house. If you want access to download this project file, click the link in the description below. Make sure to subscribe and let's get into the video. First, I'm going to grab the kick drum. The key of the track is in G minor and the BPM is 124. So I'm going to grab a kick drum that is in the root note, which is G. So I have this kick. Just cutting a little bit of this area out to kind of remove some of the boxiness. That's basically it for the kick drum, nothing special. Let's move on to the first drum, which is going to be this tom groove. So I've chosen here this tom 808 mid. It's a nice clean tom. And I'm using that to create a sense of groove in the track immediately. So I'm going to just look at this MIDI here and play that with the kick. And I want this to be in the root note as well. So I'm going to grab a tuner, throw that on there. I'm in C, which is in key with the track, but that's not what I want to do. I want to bring this down till we're in G. Looks like we're about there. And then I'm going to bring this D tune down as well until it's actually right on G. Looks about right. Then I'm going to add a little bit of delay to that sound, some EQ. Note this delay, I'm going to put just a little bit of feedback and a little bit of dry wet and filter out most of that low end. Just so I get a little bit of like a popping, like crackly bit in the background, just to add a little bit of subconscious interest. And last, I want to add some sidechain compression. So kick and compress. I'm going to duplicate that tom groove. So I'm going to just go ahead and delete this one. Tom groove, I'm going to change that to high tom. And then I'm going to just change the pitch of this tom up a full octave. So shift up on the transposition brings it to +7 semitones, which is 12 more than -5. And then the same thing, same settings, but now I just have a higher octave of the G. I'm going to open up this filter a little bit and bring the dry wet up. I'm also going to enter the ping pong on both. So we have a bit of ping pong delay. Some nice ear candy right off the bat. Really simple drum pattern just to get that simple groove going. Next, I'm going to go to the hats. Inside this hat, I have two different MIDI clips. I have the closed hat and the open hat. The closed hat has 3 hats and the open hat has 4. So let's go ahead and look at the first, the closed hat. I have a punch mono hat, punch wide, airy, and then I do have the open hat as well, which I'll be using later in the track to increase the actual energy. So on this punch mono, I'm looking for a hat that is punchy that I want to be in the center of the mix. So I've chosen this one. I'm going to throw a utility on there and make sure that it's just fully in mono. Then I'm going to go to the punch wide. Turn the panning off for now. I have this punch wide. I want to make that one wide. So I'm going to use the has effect. The has effect is just a stereo delay between the left and the right signal. You can make that using a delay. So 0% feedback, 100% dry wet, and then I have left and right 20 milliseconds apart. Sounds nice and wide. I want to make sure it sounds good in mono, so I bring my width down. Sounds good. Not losing any signal due to phase cancellation or doubling up of sounds. And then I'm going to go to the airy sound. I'm going to duplicate that has effect. But then I'm going to change it from left to right and right to left. Maybe a little bit shorter, faster. Check in mono again. Sounds good to me. So now I have a mono hat, a wide hat, and another wide hat that's nice and airy. I'll pan one of these a little bit left and one a little bit right. And then let's take a look at the MIDI again. So with the MIDI, I've actually gone in and just slightly moved some of these hits over. So if you look here, it's just slightly, very, very short amount of time pushed over the punch wide hat and the airy hat. And what I've done with the punch mono hat is I've actually changed that from the original receive. I've changed these to D1 and D1. So the punch wide and the airy hat are playing on a different note. And then the punch mono, just playing down here on the original C. It's a 16th note right after, and it's just a really short amount of velocity, or really low amount of velocity, to give it a little bit of swing. And lastly, I'm adding groove from the groove pool. So I can right click in the groove pool, browse groove library, choose one of these that I like the way that it actually sounds on the groove. And I've chosen this one, and you can just drag and drop that onto the actual MIDI. So the timing and the random and velocity and quantize. So I have my timing at 56%, which means it's going to move it at about 50% of the actual groove pool adjustment that would be used. And then random just adds a little bit of randomness, and then velocity is only about 9 on the actual MIDI clip. So if I hit commit, you can actually see that it moves some of these a little bit, just slightly. So that's actually what's happening to the sound. So it's giving it even more of a little bit of subconscious interest and a little bit more groovy. And then I have the open hat over here, which is again just using a different receive, so the C sharp. And I'm just have this turned down 3 decibels because it is a little bit loud. And I don't want this big open hat. It's a little bit too much. So I'm just going to actually cut the transient a little bit and fade in just a little bit. Next, moving on to the shakers, they're just 16th notes all the way across. And on those 16th notes, I'm also adding the same groove of it. I'm gonna grab that and throw that on, and then I'm going to hit the commit button. You can see that they are just a little bit different every time, and the velocity is also a little bit different every time. Again, just giving that humanized feel. The shaker is pretty aggressive. It's actually a hat sample. I wanna just cut out the transient again, basically the first half of the sound, to make it sound more like a shaker. And I can turn up the volume a little bit as well. And I've panned it slightly to the left because I'm going to pan the next one to the right a little bit, but I want to make sure I'm not getting too much low end. And I'll do this the same for the hats. Now I have this kind of nice airy shaker. Going on to the 16th hats now. So these are similar to shakers because they're playing on the 16ths like shakers normally would, or a lot of the time do, but they're actually much stronger. And this is to increase the perceived tempo and the energy of the track using these kind of harder hitting 16th hats. So if I look in here, again, just using this exact same MIDI, I can just drag and drop this MIDI from the shakers onto the 16th hats, but I'm using a much more aggressive hat. So I'll turn it up just slightly. And then I want to EQ out some of that low end again. Want to add a vocoder before the EQ. Kind of cut out some of the low end. The dry wet I'll bring down to about 80%, and the formant I'll bring up just a little bit. Again, I want to add some has effect, but going to the opposite side of the last one. So my last one was going to the right. I'll bring this one to the left. And then I want to grab the LFO tool, which is a Max for Live device. You can use automation, or if you have another LFO tool in your, if you don't. And what this is going to do is just add a bit of variation. Again, I'll bring the minimum and maximum to an appropriate level. So I'm getting between 120, 130 to about 200-ish milliseconds of release. Let's go a little bit lower, and let's take a listen to that. Bring the rate down a little bit. Lastly, I have the clap, which is just a basic clap, putting that on every one of the clap's usual spots. And then I want to actually grab a couple of these and offset them again. So just maybe slightly move these ones back and grab a couple more and slightly move them forward. And it makes it more interesting on that clap. I have 2 sounds. I have a snap and a clap, playing on the same note together with the kick. And then let's listen with the kick and all this. And with the open hat. Moving on to the bass next, a very simple patch. I'm just going to grab a wavetable, throw that onto the bass. You can use whatever synth you like, but I'm just going to grab wavetable, sawtooth wave, bring that frequency down quite a bit. And then I want to bring my sustain all the way up on the amplitude. I'll grab an EQ. And we're just grabbing a sub frequency with a lot of harmonics. For the MIDI, I'm going to stick with the G minor scale, which is the key of the track. I'm going to draw 4 long sustained notes. A lot of the time with Tinlicker, they have these longer bass lines. In between notes, they're held for a longer time, help the track have those beautiful chord progressions. I'm going to go from G, to get that over, I'm going to go A sharp or B flat, F, and then finally back down to C. And let's take a listen to that bass. Pretty simple. Let's add a little bit of movement with some LFO. I'll put the rate down, amount down, and then on the matrix, I'll throw a little bit onto the cutoff filter. I'll bring it up a little bit higher so we hear a bit more of those harmonics. And then filter 1 frequency, LFO 1. And I'll turn the retrigger off. Maybe a tiny bit of release on the bass, and of course at the very end I'll just add some sidechain compression. So I'll just grab it from the hat here, shakers. This is the sidechain from the kick. I'll duplicate that onto the bass. Let's move on to some of the chords and the strings and the melodies. With Tinlicker's sound, there's 4 things that I found about their synths. There's big chords, pads, and strings. There's a main lead or an arp or just something that has like a motif, which is like a small idea of a melody. It's usually repeating and carrying the track along. A lot of counter melodies, which make things feel even more emotional and beautiful. And then just a lot of layers that are making it feel very full. First, I'm going to start with the chords. So I have here strings. This is a preset inside of Ableton called Synthetic Strings Pad. I haven't done anything else to it. I'm just going to add a reverb onto that as well. And then with my own reverb. Really nice sounding strings that come stock with Ableton. To get these beautiful emotional chords, a really good technique that you can do is actually switch from major or minor to minor or major. So switching between major chords and minor chords gives you more flexibility on creating these beautiful chord progressions. You don't have to stick to just major chords or just minor chords. I'm going to start with a G minor chord. I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe I'll go another octave lower. Next, I'm going to go to a B flat major. I'll start at the B flat, which is the A sharp. And then I'm going to go up 4 now. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Next, I'm going to go to the F major. So I'll start at F. And I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. And finally, it'll be G, A sharp, D sharp. Lastly, what I'm going to do is some inversion. So I'm going to invert this octave by bringing this G up 1 full octave, and I'll bring this F up an octave. Let's increase that reverb a little bit more. It's nice and airy. Low cut on, and I want to put the high quality on this reverb as well. Next, I'm going to make a supersaw, which is going to fill up the area even more and give more of that grit to that string and chord sound. So for the supersaw, I'm going to bring the same MIDI information in, and I'm going to bring that down an octave, and then I'm going to grab a wavetable and throw that in. With this wavetable, just 1 sawtooth, oscillator 2, a second sawtooth, and bring that up an octave, and bring it down in volume a little bit. I'll bring the sustain all the way up, and the unison I will put to classic and keep it down to about 20. A couple voices on there, and a little bit of release. Lastly, some reverb. I'll just grab the same reverb from this one, duplicate that over, and turn the dry wet down a little bit. Pan one slightly left and one slightly right. This synthetic string is going to be a nice little addition to the drop. So it's going to just be this duplicated exact channel. So I'll just duplicate that over, delete this one, and this will just be high string. And this high string is going to just be one constant note that you play over the drop to give it a bit of tension. So I can just go G3, and bring that right over. And this is how it sounds. I'll actually go one more octave higher. Pull it down in volume. Just ties it all together, glues it all together, and it sounds really nice over the drop when you want to increase that tension a little bit. Couple more things here: the lead, the piano, a white noise, and a vocal. The lead sound is going to be another simple patch, but it sounds great. So wavetable, I'm gonna push this up to a sawtooth wave. Let's take a look at the MIDI before anything else. I'm just gonna fold this, again using that G minor scale and just creating a very simple but effective melody. It's just the same kind of idea over and over again with this root note changing. Keeps it nice and simple, but keeps it melodic. Into the actual patch itself, I want to change this so it's not just a sawtooth. I'm going to actually change this to classic and push the pulse width up just a couple percent. And we'll push the sync up maybe 1 or 2%. Maybe 4%. Just give it a little bit of character. Next, I'm going to bring the envelope 2 onto the frequency. So I'll bring this frequency down, change this to 24, and this envelope 2, I'm going to push up on that frequency. So we get a nice pluck. But I'm also going to go at envelope 2 and add a little bit of attack. So it's not so plucky. And then I want to bring the release up a little bit. Nice. A little bit of movement with LFO on, say, the wavetable position. So I'll go LFO 1, wavetable position, which is right here, and just slightly push that up. Retrigger off, rate down. Just a slight movement there. Pretty simple patch, but the effects are what's really going to make it come to life. So I'll grab a saturator, an EQ, a delay, and a reverb. Let's turn off those for now. I want to turn up the saturator just a little bit. And then I want to EQ at the low end for sure. Sounding good. The delay. Maybe put one of these to 5. Ping pong. Sharp it up a little bit more. And this is where things get interesting. So with the reverb, I'm going to actually put sidechain compression on another reverb. So I have this reverb, I'm going to group it together. And I'm going to call this one wet, and then duplicate it, and then dry. In the dry channel, I'm going to remove that reverb, so we only get the delay and the lead. With the wet, I get 100% dry wet reverb. From the high cut off, quality I'll put to high. Then I'm going to grab a compressor and sidechain compress that reverb signal. So I go audio from, and I choose this channel, which is lead. And then I go to this pre-effects and I change that to the dry. So now the dry signal, when it plays, it's going to squish down this reverb signal. I'll have it a little bit louder and a little bit less sidechain compression. A little bit of release, a little bit of attack, maybe a little bit more compression. It just makes room for that lead sound to come through a little bit stronger. And then after that, I'm going to add another reverb, which is going to be an airy reverb. So let's just call this airy. And this is going to be a big reverb with lots of air, so lots of high end. Really fills up the spectrum, and it's gonna sound really nice when it's all together with everything else in the track. Piano, this really ties all the melody together. It sounds really beautiful when you combine everything. So this piano is just one of the presets, again, inside Ableton, called Grand Piano. It might be called something different in Ableton 11, maybe Simple Piano or Simplest Piano, but either way, it is stock in Ableton. So what I'm going to do is actually grab the chords from here. So if I grab this MIDI area and hold shift and click here, it's going to show both the piano, or the strings rather, and then the piano down here. You can see if I highlight, it brightens them up and it says strings here and piano. So the piano that I'm using is actually the same notes inside of the strings. If you're not good at memorizing scales and you already have it in one of the MIDI clips, you can just do this and choose which of the notes you want to use. So in this, I just took a chord here and then some notes. And it's just simple, a simple melody, but I took my time with it and I played along and just tried out a couple different things, and combining this with the strings and the lead and the bass, it just really worked together. So it wasn't the first melody I chose, but just play around with the different notes. You don't have to follow the chords exactly, but just play some counter melody with some different notes inside the scale and see how it sounds. Now I have all this together. I just have one more thing, which is a vocal that I recorded. I do have some white noise here. I do use my own white noise generator. So it's just basically white noise with an amount of level that I put. So I use operator. I put this onto the white noise wave, noise white, and then I automate the volume. So over here, the notes are always playing, but you don't hear it unless I actually turn up the volume. Automate that so that it's louder here. And then I have a sidechain on that, and some EQ cutting out the low end. Not really important. You can do white noise however you like. I am adding a little bit of white noise to this to add a little bit of kind of background atmosphere, which I'll do in the arrangement as well. So when the track actually drops, it does have a little bit of that power. And it fills up some of that area and makes it sound more interesting. Lastly, I do have this vocal. It's just a word that I recorded. Way. And I have it on beats, which sounds terrible. So I'm going to choose Complex Pro. Sounds way better. And all I did was play the track and listen to it and then just set a word. And that word is going to be on this kind of downbeat. So with the kick. And then I'm just going to duplicate that over a bunch of times. Add some reverb and EQ out a lot of that low end. More decay time. And let's listen to all the melodies together now. Strings. Turning it up in volume. So what I'm going to do is a quick arrangement of this track, and then I'm going to come back, show you the final version, and then you can actually download this project in the files in the link below with the full arrangement and a little bit of a mix down as well. Okay, so I just got back from doing a quick mix down and quick arrangement. It's not perfect, but it's just something to give you a general idea of kind of how these songs are a little bit built, and especially with Tinlicker having some of their songs a little bit shorter and a little bit more radio friendly, having maybe less drums in the intro and outro and things like that. And one last thing I forgot to mention earlier in the video is that the lead sound is going to be kind of overwhelmed by the other sounds. There's a lot of information that is in the same kind of area. So if you don't have a good tool to separate overlapping layers, like something like Track Spacer, then we can do this with sidechain compression. So I'm going to show you, I have the synths all in a group here. And if you listen to this section here, there's a lot going on. So it's really hard to actually hear the lead sound so much. So I'm going to group together these three instruments And actually I'll do the piano as well. So piano, I'm just gonna slide that up one more so that I can just group it in there. So all these I'll just call lead ducking. I'm going to throw a compressor on there, and then I'm going to sidechain that from the lead. So when the lead is playing, it's going to subtly duck all of these. It has to be a fast attack and a fast release because you don't want the ducking to be more than just the lead sound. And I'll take a listen now with the lead. And before. I would go even a little bit less. Even though we're only taking a couple dB off, it is a little bit obvious, so I'll just back it off a little bit. Perfect. From the reverb up on the grand piano and the release up a little bit. So basically what I've done with the track is I have put an intro, building up part into here, and then a small breakdown, and then that breakdown leads into the actual drop. On the second portion of the drop, I have the open hat, which is going to add even more power to that just by a slight amount. And then I also have some automation on the white noise. So it starts at the beginning at 0 volume and it goes up. And as the track plays out in the drop, it actually keeps a little bit of white noise, which it keeps the track even more powerful in the actual drop. It gives it just a little bit of extra power. And then I have this lead sound. The filter frequency is opening and closing and opening. And then eventually at the very last drop, it is basically fully open as far as I'd like to bring it for this. And I could even go in and draw just a little bit of movement in there as well with the automation, and it's going to open and close that cutoff a little bit more. The bass starts off with a single note and then goes into the multiple notes just to give it a bit of variation. And then I'm just building the drums up a little bit as the track goes on. So I decided to take the vocal out of the actual drop since there's so many more things going on. And then I'm building up the Supersaw a little bit just by repeating the same notes here and not bringing up the full cutoff filter until the actual drop. Okay, and I think we're basically ready to listen to the full track from start to finish. If you want access to this Ableton project with this mix and this arrangement, click in the link in the description below where I have tons of Ableton project files like this and in the styles of other artists as well.